Nobody saw them coming. No warnings from NASA. No mysterious radio signals. No unexplained phenomena in the sky. Just an ordinary Tuesday morning that turned into the day humanity's understanding of reality changed forever. It started with every screen on Earth going dark at exactly the same moment. Phones, computers, televisions, billboards. Everything with a display suddenly showed the same message in glowing blue text. We come seeking what you discard. Do not be afraid. Then they appeared. Not one ship, but thousands, each the size of a small city, materializing simultaneously over every major population center on Earth. Their vessels defied everything we knew about physics, seeming to exist in multiple places at once, their surfaces rippling like liquid metal in impossible colors that human eyes had never seen before. The world held its breath, waiting for the invasion to begin. Military forces worldwide scrambled their jets. Nuclear submarines surfaced with their missiles ready, and civilians rushed to stockpile supplies. But what happened next was so unexpected that it took days for people to believe it was real. The beings that emerged from the ships called themselves the Collectors. They were part of something they called the Grand Galactic Recycling Empire, a civilization so advanced that they had eliminated the concept of waste entirely. Their ambassador, Supreme Collector Slack, appeared simultaneously in every capital city through some kind of advanced holographic technology. Humans, the alien's voice resonated in everyone's minds, their form shifting between solid and ethereal like smoke caught in sunlight. We have observed your species for decades. You are unique in the galaxy. The only beings we have ever encountered who constantly dispose of items that appear perfectly functional. This behavior fascinated us, and now we have come to propose a trade. Slack's next words would change human civilization forever. We offer you technology beyond your wildest dreams. Medical advances that will cure your diseases. Energy sources that will end your resource wars. All we ask in return is your garbage. Every discarded item, every piece of trash, everything you throw away. World leaders gathered in an emergency United Nations session. Scientists debated the implications. Religious figures sought meaning in ancient texts. But the offer seemed too perfect to refuse. Here was an advanced civilization offering to solve Earth's waste management crisis while giving us miraculous technology in return. What we didn't understand then, what we couldn't have known, was why humans had evolved to throw things away in the first place. We didn't understand the ancient instinct that made us discard certain items, the subtle wrongness we felt that made us label things as trash. We had no idea that we were about to hand over something far more dangerous than mere garbage to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. And by the time we figured it out, it was almost too late. Within weeks, the Collectors had set up massive recycling centers across every continent. These weren't like any buildings humans had ever seen. They seemed to exist partially in another dimension, their walls bending in ways that hurt your eyes if you looked at them too long. Massive transport ships hung above them like metallic clouds, their surfaces constantly shifting and changing. The trade began immediately. For every ton of garbage we provided, the Collectors gave us miracle technologies. Cancer vanished overnight thanks to their medical pods. Their energy crystals powered entire cities with something the size of a tennis ball. Cars started flying. Food could be created from thin air, and overnight, poverty began disappearing from Earth. But Dr. Sarah Chun, a research scientist at the Global Waste Analysis Center, noticed something strange. The Collectors weren't taking everything. They had very specific requirements about what they would and wouldn't accept. No biological waste, they insisted. No food remains. No plant material. Only manufactured items that have been discarded by humans. And most importantly, only items that humans themselves chose to throw away. Not items that were broken or worn out, but things that humans decided to discard while they were still useful. Dr. Chen couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Why were the aliens so specific about their requirements? And why did they look disappointed every time they scanned a garbage pile and found items that didn't meet their criteria? Then the first incident happened. A collector ship in Brazil picked up a shipping container full of old toys from a landfill. As they began processing it, their usually smooth operations suddenly stopped. The ship's surface turned from liquid silver to a dark, pulsing red. Strange sounds echoed across the city. sounds that made people's teeth hurt and dogs howl in fear. The collectors quickly contained whatever had happened, but Dr. Chen was watching through her laboratory's quantum microscope, a gift from the aliens themselves. For just a moment, she saw something impossible. The discarded toys weren't just objects. There was something moving inside them, something that had been dormant until the collectors tried to process them. That night, Dr. Chen couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about all the times she'd thrown away perfectly good items just because they felt wrong somehow. How many times had she picked up an old shirt or a book or a piece of furniture and felt an unexplainable urge to get rid of it? How many times had other humans done the same thing? And more importantly, what exactly were the collectors looking for in our trash? She decided to run some tests of her own, but as she would soon discover, some questions are better left unanswered, and some knowledge comes at a terrible price. Dr. Chen worked late into the night in her lab, examining discarded items under the quantum microscope. At first, everything seemed normal. An old phone showed nothing unusual. A thrown-away laptop appeared perfectly ordinary. But then she looked at an old teddy bear that a child had insisted on throwing away despite it being in perfect condition. What she saw made her drop her coffee cup. Inside the teddy bear, visible only at the quantum level, thousands of tiny structures were moving. They weren't alive in any way scientists would recognize. They existed somewhere between matter and energy, between reality and something else. They pulsed with a strange pattern that made her feel dizzy just looking at them. Hands shaking, she examined more items. The same structures appeared in everything humans had thrown away without a clear reason. They were in old clothes that people said felt wrong. They lurked in furniture that families had suddenly decided to dispose of. They filled books that readers had felt compelled to get rid of. But the truly terrifying part wasn't their existence. It was what they were doing. These quantum structures were slowly changing the objects, turning them into something else. Something that wasn't quite part of our reality anymore. Dr. Chen called her colleague, Dr. Marcus Wong, to verify her findings. As they examined more items together, they made another shocking discovery. The structures were communicating with each other. Every piece of trash humans had instinctively thrown away was part of a vast, invisible network. "This is why we throw things away," Dr. Wong whispered, his face pale. "We've been doing it for thousands of years. Not because the items are broken, but because somewhere deep in our DNA, we can sense when something isn't right anymore. When it's been infected." Just then, all the lights in the lab went out. In the darkness, the quantum microscope screen glowed with an unnatural light. The teddy bear they'd been examining began to move. And somewhere above their lab, a collector ship turned from silver to blood red. The teddy bear didn't just move, it changed. Its soft fabric rippled like water, and its button eyes began to glow with an inner light that shouldn't have been possible. Dr. Chun and Dr. Wong backed away slowly. But before anything else could happen, the emergency doors slammed shut. The collectors had locked down the entire lab. Through the windows, they could see 3 collector ships hovering directly above the building. Supreme Collector Slack's voice echoed through the facility. "You have discovered what we were searching for. We hoped humans might be unaware of what they possessed." The quantum microscope screen flickered, and suddenly it showed something that made both scientists gasp. The structures they discovered weren't just infecting objects. They were doorways. Each piece of trash humans had instinctively thrown away contained a tiny portal to somewhere else. Somewhere that existed beyond normal space and time. "Your species is unique," Slack continued, their voice now carrying a hint of what might have been fear. "For millions of years, you have been the guardians without knowing it. When these objects become infected, you discard them. Your instincts protect your reality from what lies beyond. But now," the teddy bear was changing faster now. The fabric of reality around it began to twist, and through the quantum microscope, they could see the portal inside it growing larger. Dr. Wong grabbed Dr. Chen's arm. "They're not here to help us," he whispered. "They're here because we're the only ones who can detect these things. They want our trash because we need to understand how you do it." Slack interrupted. "Our empire. We made a mistake. We found similar objects in our own space, but we had no instinct to discard them. We took them, studied them, recycled them into new forms. And now," the ship above them pulsed with that sickly red light again. and through the quantum microscope, Dr. Chun could see it. The entire ship was infected with the same structures they'd found in the teddy bear. But these were different, bigger, more numerous, more active. The collectors hadn't come to help Earth. They'd come because they were desperate to understand how humans could detect these infections. Because in their own galaxy, far across the universe, something was already breaking through. The quantum microscope screen filled with images from across the collector's galaxy. Dr. Chun and Dr. Wong watched in horror as entire planets twisted and changed, their very reality warping like melting plastic. The infection had spread through everything the collectors had recycled, turning their advanced civilization into something that no longer followed the laws of physics. We thought we were so clever. Slack's voice had changed now, becoming something that scratched at the edges of human hearing. We found these objects floating in space, things that had been thrown away by other species long ago. We brought them into our empire, studied them, broke them down, and used their materials to build new things. We never asked why they had been discarded in the first place. Through the windows, they could see more collector ships arriving, but they looked different now. The smooth silver surfaces were cracking, showing something underneath that hurt to look at. Some ships were changing shape randomly, turning into impossible geometric patterns before shifting back. Your garbage dumps, Slack continued, your landfills, they're not waste sites. They're quarantine zones. Humanity has been containing these infections for your entire history. When you feel that something needs to be thrown away, even if it looks perfect, you're actually sensing dimensional weak points. Places where things from outside are trying to break through. Dr. Chen looked at the teddy bear again. It wasn't cute anymore. It had become something that existed in too many dimensions at once. But she noticed something else too. The quantum structures inside it were different from the ones in the collector's ships. They were smaller, weaker, contained. The infection in your empire, she said slowly, it's growing stronger because you recycled the materials. You spread it into everything you built. Yes, Slack's voice was almost a scream now. And we can't stop it. Our entire empire is becoming a bridge, a gateway for them to cross over. We came to Earth hoping to learn how you detect these objects, how you know to contain them. But now we see, it's not something we can learn. It's part of what you are. The lab's walls began to shake. Outside, the infected collector ships were starting to pulse in unison, their surfaces rippling with patterns that made the air itself feel wrong. And through the quantum microscope, Dr. Chun and Dr. Wong could see it. The spaces between realities were starting to tear open. They had less than an hour before the infection, spreading through the collector fleet, reached Earth. And somewhere out in space, through the growing holes in reality, something was watching, waiting, hungry. Dr. Chen stared at the quantum microscope screen, watching reality fracture around the infected collector ships. Then she noticed something extraordinary in the data, a pattern she'd missed before. Dr. Wong, she said, her voice shaking, look at the infection rates. In everything humans threw away, the infection is contained, dormant. But in everything the collectors recycled, it's active and spreading. What's the difference? Dr. Wong's eyes widened. The quarantine protocols, they're not in the garbage dumps. They're in the act of throwing things away itself. The human act of rejection, of choosing to discard something. It somehow suppresses the infection. Slack's voice crackled through the lab speakers, now barely recognizable as speech. What are you saying? Your entire fleet, Dr. Chen said slowly. Everything you've built from recycled infected materials. Earth needs to reject it. All of it. Right now. She reached for the lab's emergency broadcast system. In every language, across every channel, she sent out a simple message. Everyone on Earth, we need your help. Look up at the collector ships. Focus on them. Feel what you feel when you know something needs to be thrown away. Reject them. All of us, together. Now. Billions of humans looked up at the sky. And for the first time in history, humanity consciously used the ability that had protected them for so long. The feeling was familiar to everyone. That same instinct that told you when something needed to be discarded, amplified by billions of minds working together. The effect was immediate. The collector ships began to shake. Their infected surfaces started to stabilize, the reality-breaking effects weakening under the weight of humanity's collective rejection. The portal started to close. It's working, Dr. Wong shouted. The infection, it can't maintain its hold when actively rejected by human consciousness. Slack's voice came one last time, clearer now. We understand finally. Your gift isn't just detecting the infection, it's containing it, suppressing it. We can't stay here, but perhaps we can still save what remains of our empire. We must throw away everything we recycled. Start again. Learn from humanity's wisdom. The collector ships began to disappear, not through their usual technological means, but by literally being rejected from Earth's reality. As they faded, Dr. Chen checked the quantum microscope one last time. The infection levels were dropping everywhere. The portals were closing. Whatever had been trying to break through was being locked out again. In the end, Earth's greatest defense hadn't been its armies or its technologies. It had been an instinct so basic that no one had ever questioned it. The simple human urge to throw away things that didn't belong in our reality. Dr. Chen picked up the teddy bear, now returned to its original form, and dropped it into a secure containment unit. As she sealed it, she wondered about all the garbage dumps throughout human history. They weren't just trash heaps. They were humanity's ancient battlefields in a war they never knew they were fighting. And somewhere in the dark spaces between galaxies, the collectors began their own journey of learning to let go, to throw away, to protect reality one discarded item at a time.